Ever wonder what it's like to be photographed and to photograph over 3,000 weddings under the neon lights of Las Vegas? Or how capturing love stories turned into empowering entrepreneurs through a camera lens? Today's guest, DeAnna Vincent, brings us behind the scenes of a photography career that has spanned decades, thousands of weddings, and one powerful reinvention. Welcome back to the Happiness on Tap podcast, where we bring you inspiring stories and practical insights for a happier, more fulfilling life. Your go to podcast for uplifting conversations that stir the heart and ignite the spirit. I'm your host, Leann, and today I am thrilled to welcome DeAnna Vincent, a seasoned photographer whose journey began on the legendary Las Vegas Strip and led her to build one of Albuquerque's most respected studios, Dry Heat Photography. From navigating 400 weddings a year to helping professionals and creatives present their best selves to the world, DeAnna's story is packed with passion, humor, and plenty of lessons on building a fulfilling career. Whether you're a creative, a business owner, or somebody who just loves a good origin story, you're in for a treat. Let's welcome DeAnna to the show. DeAnna, it is so wonderful to have you with me today.
Thank you, Leann. Thanks for having me.
I'm looking forward to this conversation and sharing your amazing story.
Thank you. Me too.
So let's get started. Let's go back to the Vegas Strip. What drew you to photography, and what was it like shooting weddings in such an iconic and chaotic environment?
Well, that's a loaded question. Yeah, what got me into it in the first place, I think I have the same kind of origin story as most professional photographers or career photographers. And that is, I was always the kid with the camera, at all my family functions. And I didn't know what I was doing, but I was happy about it. And, I always had a camera in my hands. But originally I had gone to school to be a music major. And that is why I had moved to Las Vegas, Nevada in the first place, was to attend UNLV as a music major. But I ended up dropping out and basically going to work as a bartender. And after a couple years of that, my boyfriend at the time suggested, and kind of an insistent way, but he suggested that I should just go back to school and just take a class, like any class, just for fun, just to see, his exact words were, maybe you'll find something you didn't know you were good at. So, one piece of wisdom from that situation. So I went not back to UNLV, but back to the what's now called the College of Southern Nevada. It had a different name at the time, but it's the community college that's in Las Vegas. And I took a photography class. I didn't know at the time that school actually had a nationally recognized program in commercial photography. I found that out later. But I just took a photography class. And so this is back in the days of film and dark rooms. This was like 1998. And but it was just one of those light bulb kind of moments. So, I'll never forget the first day of class. Our teacher was doing a demonstration in the dark room where he printed an image from the enlarger and was running it through the chemicals. And when I saw the image, appear on the paper in the developer, it was just like, oh, just like one of those, like, oh my God, kind of moments. And as I continued with the class, I started to discover that, for the same amount of effort that I was putting into being a music major and getting absolutely nowhere, that I was really making progress with this, and I was really good at it, and I really enjoyed it. And so I just kept going with it. At the same time, I decided that I really could not stand to be a bartender, not even one more day. So I went out and started applying for photography jobs at all the little chapels on the strip, because to me, that seemed the most plentiful source of work. And I ended up getting hired at the Little White Wedding Chapel, which is super famous. And but I kept going back and taking more photography classes. So I was actively working and schooling at the same time. And so, but to ask about your question, like, what's it like to shoot 3,000 weddings on the Las Vegas Strip? It's chaos is what it's like. So most of the chapels have very loose rules about scheduling, or basically the rule is to pack as many into the day as physically possible. So for instance, at the Little White Wedding Chapel, they took appointments, but they never told anyone no. So we could have 7, 8, 9 appointments at the same time. And another chapel that I worked at, and they were slightly more organized. They would double book on the 15 minutes. So that's 7.5 minutes from beginning to end, including the photos. But basically what I learned from that was, people skills and to work fast and to be efficient. Because as the photographer, I would be the last person to still be with the couple holding up the start of the next wedding. So if we were not cranking them through fast enough, that heat was coming back on me for being too slow. So it really forced me to, chop chop. But it was a great, trial fire learning experience that I'm grateful for that experience. And I was able to work in some really famous places. I was featured on the news a couple of times just by basically by virtue of getting shafted on working on Christmas Eve. So, that does that answer the question?
It does. And one thing I was thinking when you were talking about being booked so close together and all in a small location was also having to deal with like sound and people's conversations. Did you do any video shooting, or it's all photography?
So I really didn't shoot any video. And the way most of the chapels handle that, if someone wanted video, was they had basically like, well, I guess it wouldn't have been webcams at the time, but they had a remote video system. They had surveillance cameras, basically. So if someone wanted video, it was just a matter of like just turn it on and turn it off. But there was really no editing. There was no, if a fire truck's going down the road right then, it was just, oh well. There was really no kind of compensation made for editing or sound or anything like that. It was just you get what you get, and it costs $79. So like, what do you want?
So what made you decide to leave Las Vegas and take over Kevin's photography in Albuquerque?
Well, I was from New Mexico originally, so it was more a matter of like coming back home. But basically, it was kind of a perfect storm of things happened in Vegas, and it was like everything kind of just fell apart spontaneously. And it just seemed to me like that was the universe saying, your time here is done. I just didn't really have a good reason to continue staying there. So that's why I decided to come to Albuquerque, and that was in 2001. And so that was like Mother's Day of 2001. And I think I started at Kevin's Photography in August 2001. And it wasn't necessarily my intention to take over, but there was a need and an opportunity there. And also I was very eager to establish myself and to build a career in the field, and like, here's this great opportunity. And so I just ran with it as much as I could.
Yeah. Yeah. How long were you in Vegas total? Now.
The question about how long I was in Las Vegas.
Mhm.
Okay. I was in Las Vegas for about 6 years. So I moved out there in 1995 and I came back in 2001.
Wow, incredible. So managing a studio now that
Mhm.
shoots like 350, 400 weddings a year still sounds pretty intense. How did you stay sane and creative during that time?
Well, we'll take those as separate issues. I don't think I really did stay sane, actually. I think maybe I got kind of used to it, but the constant like chaos and pressure of that definitely takes a toll because basically when you're dealing with that many weddings and we had a staff of 12 photographers who are going out and doing things that I can't control what all of them do, right? So they're just out there in the world doing things. But yet if they mess up, suddenly that has become my problem. And yeah, so that's kind of not ideal and was definitely one of the things that later contributed to me just not wanting to be responsible for problems that I couldn't prevent, you know what I mean?
Hmm.
So, but as far as like how did I stay creative, I think that was really probably the only real reward to the situation. And I was very competitive and still very driven to be successful as a photographer. So the creativity was like that was the outlet, and that was the way to to prove myself. That was the way to do a good job for my clients because at that job, brides were able to choose which photographer they wanted amongst whoever was not booked for their day. And so um it was my goal to be booked first, and I usually was, and usually well over a year in advance.
Cool.
And so like the that kind of, that makes you feel good. And
Yeah,
that was probably my, like what I would hold on to say like, oh, this is worth it during that time.
yeah, I can definitely understand when you're competing with other photographers, even not just within your company, but just other photographers. You want to stand out and show where your creativity shines, where your talent shines, so that,
Exactly. And so it was not only internal competition within the business, but we were one of many studios in Albuquerque. So, the competition as far as that goes is kind of fierce on multiple levels.
yeah. So in 2007, then you made the leap and started dry heat photography. What gave you
Yes.
the courage to strike out on your own?
Well, I would say it was honestly a few things. So there was a significant amount of turmoil happening at Kevin's photography and financial problems within the business that again were like problems I couldn't control. And it literally was to the point that I felt if I stayed there, that I was risking coming to work one day and finding yellow tape on the door. I felt that it was no longer beneficial to me in the big picture to continue working at that business. And but even then, I was still afraid to leave because it was myself and my now ex-husband. We both worked there, and one of us couldn't leave. So we both had to leave at the same time. It was an all or nothing situation. And but it was just now and then, right? The universe just gives you like a big green sign, says go now. And it was kind of one of those moments where it was like, okay, we're going to plan this out and we're going to stay for another year and we're going to do whatever. It started like that. But once that ball was rolling, like 2 days later, we just decided, no, we're out. And we put in our 2 weeks. And so my birthday, November 9th, was our last day. And we both quit our full time jobs to launch our own business with a whopping, I don't know, $6,000 in the bank, which is terrifying.
But
But
you did it.
it paid off. It paid off.
And they're like we talked about just a second ago, that competition. So now
Mhm.
you're competing against the company you worked for so long and
Yep.
all of the other photography studios here in Albuquerque, and launching your own business, which is hard in of itself every day.
Every day. Yeah.
The money, the marketing, the advertising, when you're working for somebody else, you're not thinking about those things. You're not having to worry about those things. You have access to a room where you can do certain shoots, and now you're having to figure out where are you going to do these, or did you have a studio as dry heat photography, or have you kind of always been more of a mobile photographer?
In the first iteration of the business, we did have a studio, and we had that lined up before leaving Kevin's. So we were renting um, basically a big room in an art gallery where we were already showing our fine art photography. And so we were renting a big room in this gallery and using it as our office, even though we still primarily would shoot on location. But it was somewhere for brides to come in and we could sit and meet with them and show them wedding albums and go through that whole thing. And then over time, we ended up moving from there and opening an art gallery / studio in Corrales. And then after that, moving to the 5100 building on Wantabo. So yeah, so we definitely did have that studio space, mostly in the name of like keeping up with the Joneses of looking legit,
Mhm.
which we at that time having a physical studio space was a little more important than it is now as far as the way you were perceived. But you know, when you talk about competition, like from other studios and now becoming a direct competitor of our former employer, but what really paid off for us was that Rick and I had really become the public face of Kevin's photography. So it was our work that counted. And it was our connections with all the other vendors. You know, when we left, we kind of took a gamble that those people would be supportive of us, and they were. So that was, I mean, I really cannot overstate the importance of that because it allowed our business to look like a phenomenal overnight success. And in reality, it not really, right? Like we had been paying our dues and building this thing up for 6, 7 years before making the leap. But from the outside, it looks like, you know, and of course, like literally, we had asked our families to give us gift cards for groceries for Christmas that year because we were afraid that we would be broke. And
Yeah.
as it turned out, we did not need their grocery money. and, and that was just a huge kind of blessing that I think we didn't really even understand the magnitude of at the time. We kind of just assumed like, well, of course they're, yeah, good for us. you know?
That is such a great and powerful story, because it is, as I was saying, it's difficult to be an entrepreneur and take those risks and have that
Mhm.
courage and wonder where the clients are going to come from. I have my own struggles on a regular basis as an entrepreneur. You think the people your friends and family are going to support you, and some do and some don't.
Mhm.
And so making your own path and putting in the time to for people to be able to find you on the wonderful world of the internet, um,
Right.
it is difficult. And I mean, I love looking at your website. Your work is
Thank you.
absolutely stunning. So I hope people take time to really go and look at everything you do. But let's shift the focus
Okay.
from weddings to now headshots and promotional work. What do you love about working with professionals and creatives now?
Well, I think that's a field that in Albuquerque anyway seems to be a little underserved. And I also feel so if I could back up like a little bit, when I relaunched my business by myself a few years ago, it was not the same kind of like, trumpets and confetti like it was the first time. So it was that time really was like starting over from nothing. And that's pretty eye-opening. And when I did it, it's like I knew I had to do it, but I wasn't prepared to do it at all. I didn't have a ton of money in the bank. I had to replace almost everything, all of my gear, my computer, major software learning curves. There was a lot that went into it, and it was difficult. It really was. And one of the things that you notice as soon as you say I'm in business, the number of people coming at you asking for money it's like unending. And a lot of them come in the guise of help, but not really. But it's just the amount of hands like give me money is a lot. And it can feel overwhelming when you're already stressed about how am I going to pay my mortgage? And you know what I mean? And so then you also end up with this problem, or like a problem that I had was that I knew like I have the experience, I'm legit, I'm good at this, but I don't have the resources financially to position myself where I really need to be in order to look legit. And so coming back to the question about, headshots and professionals, I do work with a lot of like newer business owners, and I try to offer them a very affordable, but also a very high quality service. And the reason for that is because I just don't feel like it shouldn't be a luxury of the wealthy. Excuse me, if that makes sense. So I want them, geez. I don't want money to be the reason why someone can't position their business the way they need to.
And as somebody who
That
came
wasn't
to
the
you,
entirety of the question, actually. I'm sorry, what?
I was asking you why you love working with professionals and creatives, but
Yeah.
I'm going to touch on what you were just saying, which is why I came to you for new headshots, because I hadn't done any new photography of myself or my business in
Right.
3 years. And what you offered was very affordable. I was able to afford to schedule to go and get new headshots. And I appreciate that you kept it affordable, because in comparison to what I paid 3 years ago for like a half a day to photograph myself and my business, was definitely worth every penny. But that was all startup money that I had, set aside. And as we were talking, sometimes it's hard to bring in money and bring in clients and keep the money coming in so that you can afford to do these things. And when you have to do them to stay up to date, to
Right.
be that face forward person for your company, you have to do those things. So I really appreciate that you did do that, that you do that, and that I was able to benefit from it when I needed new headshots.
Yeah. And it's, to get back to your original question, like, why do I enjoy working with those people, with creatives and professionals? I think for one thing, it's a bit of a break from the weddings, but I also feel that in some ways, it's kind of more authentic, because in a lot of ways, I mean, weddings are great, and so don't misunderstand, but in a lot of ways, a wedding is kind of a staged fairy tale. And the idea of authenticness usually takes a back seat to like what is pretty, what is ideal. Does that make sense? You know, it's like, are we portraying the right image of what a wedding is supposed to be instead of showing what it is? And but in working with people in kind of a different context, I think that in this field, it's very much about what is authentic and what is real. Because when you're trying to work with an entrepreneur or an artist to really show themselves, it has to be about that, because what else is there for it to be about? And and so I love working with people that basically are not afraid to make a funny face, are not afraid to try something even if it doesn't work. Because I just like that freedom to experiment and the creativity, and I like for them to feel free to be themselves.
And you definitely do that. I told you when we were done, I, shared about it in different things on different platforms about how comfortable you made me feel as somebody who doesn't like being photographed, who isn't used to being photographed after a
Right.
lifetime of avoiding it, but knowing that as an entrepreneur, and that it's just me, I'm a coach, I don't have a team. I have to be the face of my business.
Right.
I don't want my website to be portrayed by art that isn't me, because again, that goes back to authenticity. As you said, I don't want people looking at my website and there's a picture of a woman coaching somebody who isn't on my staff or isn't me. So I appreciate
Right.
your approach to making clients feel confident and comfortable. And yes, you made me laugh many times when I was trying to be as serious as I could. But I appreciate that. Those were the pictures that I did really enjoy much more as you were showing me my choices. So, I think you do a great job
Thank
in
you.
that to help people feel comfortable.
Yeah. And that's, as a portrait photographer, I mean, that is the skill probably more than the actual using the camera is the people skill part of it. Because most people are uncomfortable and most people are self-conscious and most people are not used to being photographed all the time. And there's two different degrees, right? But for sure, if you feel awkward and self-conscious, there's not hardly anything I can do to make you look different than that. So the key to that is to build rapport, to get them to relax, um, to make them aware that I am making every effort to find their best angles, and and to try to make them look as good as they can and as good as I can make them look.
Yeah. And you do a great job.
Thank you.
As someone who has been in the industry for decades, how have you seen photography and clients change over time?
Well, y- you know, in some ways, I was seeing no change at all. But when I was at Kevin's Photography, we were at the leading edge of photography studios switching from film to digital in Albuquerque. So we were one of the first studios to do that in a large scale way, and to have to learn not only how to do that, but also how to undo every time we had said to someone in the past, oh no, we don't shoot digital, we only shoot film. Oops. And then have to go back and like backpedal on that and re-educate our clients that in fact, the digital is good. The digital is the way of the future, that it is as good as film or better. So we had to figure out a lot of stuff, and they're not going to lie, like there was a good bit of resistance at first when we made that switch. And so that was a main like shift over decades, and also a really big difference to the way that photographers have to handle their business. We didn't used to have to spend hours and hours and hours retouching images. We just sent the film to the lab. Done. Well, that's not how it works anymore. So as far as, it completely changed the way we do business and the way we work and the skill sets that photographers have to have. On the other hand, as far as like, especially wedding photography, it blew the doors open for creativity. And because with digital, your expense is in the gear up front, but it's not so much in how many photos you shoot. Whereas with film is pretty much $1 every time you hit the shutter. So you're not going to take 50 extra experimental photos because that's literally coming off your profit margin on this job. So in the days of film, we would shoot very concisely, 2 or 3 shots of each pose, just very rote. And then when we transitioned into this other format, it allowed us to experiment freely with any and every idea that we could come up with, which was fantastic. And then over time, of course, clientele started to expect this new, more creative style. But as far as, clients, the downside, or maybe the more significant downside to digital, was that it brought photography to a consumer level. So now anybody can go to Costco and spend $900 and get a camera that takes, decent photos. Now it doesn't go take them by itself, but it created this idea that you could go buy a nice camera and call your photographer.
Yeah. And I think,
and for a while, it kind of undermined the example of professionals.
yeah. And I think cell phones are doing their part of trying to do that as well.
Yes. I would never have thought in the beginning of this that someone would tell me that instead of hiring me, they were going to let their little sister shoot the wedding with one of these. And I'm sure they got what they paid for.
Yeah. They're fun to
I'll just leave it at that.
They're fun to see what your guests will shoot that
Sure.
while the photographer's busy with something else.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to see the little funny things that are going on with your guests.
Absolutely.
The not perfect photos, and those are fun. They're a lot of fun to have and see after the fact. But when you're paying somebody, that's what you're paying them to be there for. You're paying for their skill, their technique, their time. And, you talked about the change in technology to where before people were paying for a certain number of photographs. And now you really have the ability for touch-ups. I appreciate that. You can kind of blend in the dark circles under the eyes, the skin patches, the wrinkles. And, there are those of us that want those little fixes, and we appreciate the extra time that you take in those final pictures, which were very different from just a photograph. It's like, this is what you got. There was no editing that photograph. You got one of 3 choices. So I think people need to be reminded of what they're paying for.
Exactly. And the skills, if you will, the Photoshop, the Lightroom, like all of those skills, when you see beautiful professional photos, they don't fall out the camera looking like that. I mean, they do to an extent, right? Because Photoshop is not a crutch to fix bad pictures, but it's a tool to make your good pictures even better. But there is a significant difference between an unretouched image and a retouched image. And then with regard to event photography and especially weddings, not only are you paying for a considerable level of technical skill, but you're paying for organization skills and people management skills and time management and problem solving. So a wedding never goes the way, no matter how much you plan it, it is not going to go the way it's supposed to. It just, to a degree, it could go pretty good, or it could go radically off the rails. And because there's things you can't control, like other people and the weather. And so a lot of what your professional photographer is doing is adapting and problem solving in real time to deal with these issues as they arise and still deliver the product that is expected by the client. And so, whereas an amateur is going to go sit in the corner and cry because everything's gone sideways, your pro has already got a plan, is already thinking 5 steps ahead, has already come up with plan B. So a lot of what you're paying for is the competency of a seasoned professional.
Great. Yeah, you put that in perfect terms. In my mind, I'm thinking, flower girls walking down the aisle and then all of a sudden in panic or overwhelm and crying and wanting to run back, or there's just so much. And weather's definitely the case, especially outside weddings. And yeah, you want somebody who is thinking ahead and is ready to capture the images that they capture and not worry about the ones that aren't, the ones people are going to see. You may get 1 or 2 images of that flower girl before she bolts or cries, that are still going to be beautiful. And, so that's what you're paying for. And I think that's what people need to remember. I think a lot of times, like my husband and I are real active in the local artist community. And so when we go and we're like going to art walk, we're doing that this Friday, and we're talking with our friends that are artists, and the amount of time that they put into an original piece, and then they may be selling a print for $20 and people are still trying to haggle them. It just makes me sick. It's like, what is there in life that you're not trying to haggle about? Like, you are paying for somebody's passion, education, experience. You obviously love what you're buying, so pay for it and be thankful. We had okay, there we go. So what do you think?
Sorry, cut out for just a second.
Yeah, it happens. What do you think is the key to building a photography business that is both creativity fulfilling and financially sustainable? Because obviously you've over decades have had all of those different things come up. So if you're talking to another starting photographer.
Well, honestly, I think it comes down to defining yourself in a niche. So, and at the same time, having a super diverse skill set. So I do think it's important to define yourself in a niche so that you become the go-to person for fill in the blank. So whatever that niche is, it doesn't really matter, but pick something that you really like and run with it. But at the same time, be a competent photographer. So if a job opportunity comes up that's outside of this thing that you specialize in, but you should still know how to do that thing. You know what I mean? So you don't want to have to turn down jobs because you don't know how to do them. And at the same time, though, you don't want to take jobs that you're not qualified to do. So there's kind of a fine line there. But I think it's important to have a really robust professional skill set as a photographer, which means not shooting in program mode, which means understanding how the camera physically works, knowing about lighting, knowing about posing, knowing about all the like old school things that you used to have to know before cameras got smart. And then at the same time, being able to apply those technical skills to the niche that you want to specialize in so that you can really define yourself and make your mark in that field.
Yeah. Yeah. That's perfect. I think that, we need to be enough well-rounded to where we're not putting all of our eggs in one basket. And again, I'm going to tell
Yeah.
people to make sure they go and check out your website and see all of the wonderful different things that you do. I love your small towns where you went out somewhere and you see these amazing pictures of things that, maybe other people don't even know is beautiful about our lovely state.
Mhm.
And you've got your wedding photos, and I see other headshots that you do for other people, and so I get to see this diversity that you have created, but I also get to see where your specialty is and where it absolutely shines. So
Thank
great
you.
suggestions. um, we're going to kind of wrap this up. What
Okay.
brings you happiness these days in both your work and your personal life?
Well, I think with the work is, in addition to obviously continuing to book new clients and get to know new people and work with new people, but like this year specifically, I've been making it a point to go and do creative photo shoots that I want to do, regardless if someone has hired me to do them or not. So if there's an idea that I have, something that I want to explore, I'll find a willing guinea pig that will want to go out and play with me on a job, or I'll just go do it by myself, depending on what it is. But for me, I think it's important to be able to go out and experiment and to kind of work in a free sense of not feeling under the gun of like, oh my God, they're paying so much money for this, it has to be perfect. And to be able to have that freedom to just, let's just try a bunch of crazy stuff, and if it works, it works, and if it doesn't, whatever, we tried. And from those shoots, I learn a lot, and it's fulfilling in the sense of getting to really be creative without worrying what the outcome's going to be. And that kind of fuels me going forward with new ideas and new skills in the shoots that really are high pressure and really do matter.
Mhm.
And personally, I'm happy with this phase of my career where I'm able to have some kind of balance, where I'm doing the kind of shoots that I want to do and am still able to have some kind of personal life. When all you do is weddings, it very literally controls your entire existence. If you are awake, you're either shooting pictures or editing pictures. And I that is not an exaggeration. Sun up to sundown every single day. That is all you do. And after a while, that starts to take a toll. So part of the reason that I pivoted into a different area was to try to create a better balance for myself. And I think I've been able to accomplish that. And I still shoot weddings. I've shot a few weddings this year. And because I'm not so stressed out all the time, I feel like I'm able to bring my better self, into that situation. So I guess, what brings me happiness is I feel like I've created a better existence for myself in this field with the new iteration of my business.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I think that's important for everyone to remember in everything that we do.
Mm-hmm.
When you love what you do, it's not the same as showing up to a job that you're unhappy with, that is just an existence to keep a roof over your head, but you
Right.
actually enjoy it. So when you love what you do, you're not really working. You're just, life is beautiful and colors are brighter, and like you said, you get to show up as your best self in those situations,
Yeah.
in those settings that, you know, maybe wasn't your 100% best self when you were shooting so many in a day or, you know, so thank you for sharing that. I think
Right.
that's
I mean,
really important for everyone to remember.
absolutely.
Where can people connect with you? And I want to make sure that way I can include it in the show notes as well, so people will know where they can book with you, where they can look at your amazing work.
So the best place I would say is through my website, which is dryheatphotography.com. They can also email directly, which is hello@dryheatphotography.com. And those are probably the best two ways. You can also find me on LinkedIn, just as my name, DeAnna Vincent, or on Instagram, which is @dryheatphotography.
Wonderful. I will make sure to include those in the show notes. DeAnna, thank you so much for sharing your incredible journey with us today. From Vegas vows to professional power shoots, your story is a beautiful reminder that we are all evolving and that joy often comes from having the courage to reinvent ourselves.
Mhm.
To our listeners, if you are in New Mexico and need headshots that don't look like mugshots, or just want to support a woman-owned business that knows how to capture confidence, please check out DeAnna's work at dryheatphotography.com. I will make sure to include all of that information in the links. As always, drink in the joy, refill your cup, and keep your happiness on tap. Thank you again, DeAnna, for being here.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
This was a great, great episode.
Thank you, Leann.